started with our first story. For those of you that watch the Super Bowl, and if you're like me and you really like to see the ads during the Super Bowl, you may have noticed that there was an ad for RFK Jr.'s campaign. Now, apparently that ad actually caused quite a stir. And there's actually a poll question there pinned to the top of the live chat. If you can answer that question. I looked at the poll right before we went live. It's really interesting that some of the responses there. But let me put this up here. We're going to start with the ad first. So I'm going to show you the ad. You can let me know what you think about this ad. And then I'm going to dive in. So part of the criticism that has come from this ad is the fact that it was basically an old school Kennedy ad from JFK days, RFK days. And instead of having, of course, JFK or RFK, they inserted RFK Jr. in that place instead. So I kind of saw this ad as someone who grew up during that time was a sense of nostalgia for them, right? Let's show the ad. And I want you to be honest what you think about this. Here it is.
Kennedy, 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 Kennedy.
Do you want a man for president who's seasoned through and through? A man who's old enough to know
And young enough to do.
Well, it's up to you, it's up to you. It's strictly up to you.
American Values 2024 is responsible for the content of this advertisement.
Okay. So that's the ad. Now, again, I think if you were alive during that time when JFK ran or RFK ran, for you, it represents a sense of nostalgia, right? I was not alive during that time. I think a lot of you watching me were not alive during that time. And so the question that I had when I saw this ad was, who are they trying to appeal to? Who are they trying to reach? Are they trying to reach those older voters that remember this ad for JFK, right? That's what I would think. And then I said to myself, why aren't they trying to reach like the younger voters, right? So to me, it wasn't like my cup of tea. RFK Jr. is not my candidate anyway, but it wasn't my cup of tea. And I think it's just because I just don't get it really. Again, like I said, because it represents that type of nostalgia that I just was not alive to have seen. Right now, here's the problem. Apparently, RFK Jr. is claiming that he was not responsible for this ad. He said that the American Values PAC actually created that ad and that he was not aware of it. So technically, when something is a part of your campaign, the campaign is going to be seen as responsible for it, regardless if another PAC created it or you say you didn't know about it. The campaign is going to be seen as liable for that PAC. That's just how it goes. Now, that's a super PAC that created that ad. And if there ever was another reason for me to try to convince people not to have a super PAC, that could be another one right there. Them doing things that you may not have approval over. However, there was some pushback in reference to what RFK Jr. said. And one of the pushback was the fact that he said he didn't approve this, didn't know about it, but he retweeted it. And actually, until this morning, this was actually pinned to the top of his Twitter page. So he retweeted this here. It says, "Our momentum is growing. It's time for an independent president to heal the divide in our country." And you can see it's shared here from American Values 2024. That is the super PAC. If you go to his Twitter page now, you will see there is a different pinned message there now. It says, "My new book is out." So it's really interesting. A lot of people were saying that Marianne Williamson was selling a book. Yeah, I said, yeah. And I also said RFK Jr. was also selling a book. So you see, this goes both ways. So he actually swapped out that pinned tweet. So that tweet was pinned. It's not pinned anymore. Now, I want you to hear what he said to Jesse Waters as he explains, about the Super Bowl ad. And he actually issued an apology. Apparently, there were people that were upset, family members that were upset about that ad because it represents something different to them. There were, I think some people in the RFK Jr. campaign will take a look at this. Some people thought it was a great idea. Some people thought it was not a good idea. But we're going to get into his explanation here because, again, like I said, that ad actually caused quite a stir.
RFK Jr., is Joe Biden fit to be president?
Well, I think anybody can make up their mind about that as well as I can. I hope that if he has the kind of cognitive challenges that the special counsel indicated he has, and if I were in that position, a member of my family or staff would approach me and assist me in gently stepping down.
So is that the role for Jill Biden to play right now?
So right now he's talking about Joe Biden's mental acuity.
What did you say?
Was that the role for Jill?
I think she should do it. And I think what President Biden, if President Biden wants to run, because these issues have now been raised in a very, very public settings, he needs to come out and have unscripted discussions with voters. He needs to have a debate. Tell us what he's going to do about closing the border. Tell us what he's with the American people, what he's going to do about restoring the middle class, about ending the wars, the forever wars around the world, about unraveling corporate capture and all these issues that, are critical to our country right now. And we need a president who is on the ball, somebody who we all trust to answer that phone call at 3:00 in the morning and to handle the complexities and the nuance of the kind of crises that face our country at a very, very critical point in history. And I think he needs to show people that he can do that. And the best way to do that is in an open debate.
Yeah, and that's tough for him because it's a catch-22. The more he goes out there to show he has what it takes, the more everybody sees that he doesn't. I was watching the game last night, and all of a sudden I saw a brilliant ad by your campaign, or maybe a super PAC. Let's watch this.
Do you want a man for president who's seasoned through and through? A man who's old enough to know
and young enough to do?
Well, it's up to you, it's up to you. It's strictly up to you.
Did you guys catch the part in that ad where it says a man who's, it says, and young enough to do? That kind of is interesting because they were talking about Joe Biden's age and whether or not he's up for the task for re-election. So it's interesting because you have that in that ad as well.
So that was a classic Kennedy family ad that you repurposed, and then you apologized for running that ad. Why'd you do that?
Well, I know. As you know, Jesse, there's a couple of members of my family that do not support my run for president. And I knew that ad was not run by our campaign. It was run by the super PAC, and I was delighted to see it. I was sitting with Cheryl and my kids and a lot of other family members watching the Super Bowl when that popped up. So you can imagine my surprise. The super PAC's not allowed to talk about those things with us.
Pause. So you see one of the problems with super PACs? It's not just the money issue. They're not even allowed to discuss, I guess, what type of ads they're going to run with the campaign. Just another reason, folks, for you not to want to use a super PAC. This is why I say no super PACs, also because of the money reason, but then that lack of control that you have over those super PACs.
But I knew when I saw the ad, I loved the ad, but I knew that it would irritate some members of my family because it used some of that old Kennedy iconography. So I don't apologize for the ad, but I don't want to hurt people's feelings. And
let me tell you what I think here. So I think if you leave the Democratic Party, which RFK Jr. did, the super PAC, to me, I don't understand. I guess, the sense of nostalgia. But in my opinion, if you're looking to do an ad for the Super Bowl, which, by the way, these ads are like $7 million for like 30 seconds, $7 million for like 30 seconds, right? Why use a Kennedy ad from JFK, et cetera, who was a Democrat. He ran through the Democratic Party. He won through the Democratic Party. You want to do something that signifies that RFK really broke away from the duopoly and is running as an independent. So if I'm on the marketing team, I get it. They realize it's kind of, they're like, oh, to be catchy, and people who were alive during that time, they'll remember this and recognize it. I get that, but it also doesn't appeal to a lot of people who were not alive during that time. A lot of us just sitting back like, I don't know what this is, but okay. But at the same time, it was kind of weird to me that you're going to show this Democrat nostalgic ad, but RFK Jr. broke away from that and is running as an independent. So I think you should have used something that signified that breaking away from the duopoly instead of using something that was a part of the Democratic Party before. That's just my opinion.
And it's an easy thing for me to do. To say it's not the ad I would have run if I had chosen it. I'm very happy they did it. I think it was very creative, but I also knew it would hurt people, and I don't want to hurt anybody.
Yeah, well, I hurt members of my family every night on Jesse Watters Primetime and on the 5. That's what happens when you live in a diverse political family. RFK Jr., thank you so much for joining us.
So he did apologize for the ad. Like, for me, this is another thing where I feel like sometimes RFK Jr. apologizes for things that he really doesn't need to apologize for. And then there are times where I feel like there are things he should apologize for, but he won't, like obviously the Israel-Gaza issue. Now, I want to show you what some people thought about it. Kim Iverson came in here and she said, just saw RFK Jr.'s Super Bowl commercial. Smart move for his campaign. So Kim Iverson thought it was smart. And then we get into Ben Shapiro. Now, I want you to hear what he said about RFK Jr.'s campaign. And also, he brings up something else in reference to political Super Bowl ads. It was interesting. The only political ad I saw during the Super Bowl from an actual candidate was RFK Jr. Maybe I missed one. If I missed one in the chat, let me know. Might have been when I went to the restroom or something. But I don't remember seeing a political ad for Joe Biden. I didn't see one for Donald Trump. I didn't see one for Jill Stein or Cornel West or anyone else that's running for president. Like I said, $7 million for a 30-second spot. So it costs a lot of money to do that. But I was actually surprised that neither Trump or Biden had a Super Bowl ad, because they do have the money to do that. Listen to what Ben Shapiro said about it.
That was the RFK ad. So there was a super PAC for RFK who put out an RFK ad during the Super Bowl. So let me first state, this is super smart. This is really, really, really smart. The reason this is really smart is because Joe Biden forewent the honorary Super Bowl interview that every incumbent president gets. And the reason he did that is because he's too old for the job and he can no longer function, as we saw last week, as we'll get into in just a moment. And Donald Trump didn't take out an ad. I don't know why Trump didn't take out an ad. This would be like a perfect time for Trump to take out an ad. I assume maybe the people broadcasting the Super Bowl didn't want Trump to take out an ad.
What do you guys think about that? Do you think the reason that there wasn't an ad for Biden or Trump is because their campaign or whatever maybe said, no, not a good idea? Do you think it's because actually the Super Bowl didn't think it was a good idea? I wonder about that.
But the fact is that RFK did. And this ad is very smart. The reason this ad is very smart is because, again, it is seeking normalcy. So what the RFK Super PAC understands, that what Americans basically want is everybody to calm the F down. That's kind of what most Americans want at this point. All they want is to know that they go to work, they're going to take home the vast majority of their money, they're going to be able to raise their families without being victimized by street crime, that they're not going to have their boys turned into girls or whatever, that like they just want a baseline level of normalcy. That's what most Americans are looking for at this point.
So I didn't get that from the ad. I didn't get that from the ad. That's interesting that he thinks that it represents a part of normalcy. And I say this because remember, that's Kennedy family ads. You think about JFK. JFK actually broke away from some of those norms that the deep state wanted to stay in place. JFK, remember, he wanted to get us out of some of these foreign conflicts. He didn't want to escalate some of those things. Actually, when it came to Cuba, remember he came back and he said, nope, that wasn't a good idea, right? Remember what we found out about JFK in reference to Israel. Remember, we found out that JFK actually did not like the fact that Israel was acquiring nuclear weapons. He did not like that. Remember, he kept trying to go visit the facility, and then next thing you know, he was assassinated. So that never actually happened. He also did not like where Zionism was heading. That was another thing that was discovered by Mint Press News. He didn't like that. He also thought that the parent organization of AIPAC should have registered as a foreign agent. So I would argue to Ben Shapiro, one of the reasons why JFK was assassinated is because he did not represent that type of normalcy. Remember, before there was Bernie Sanders, even JFK started to talk about how people should have health care, how everyone should have health care. So JFK did have some of those, what you would call Democrat, socialist, ideas of his own. So think about that for a second. So I didn't get the impression that he got that it represents some type of normalcy or whatever. But I do think it represents a sense of nostalgia for a lot of people. I also, when I saw that ad, I thought about, this is a way for him to basically run off of the Kennedy name. Something similar that Joseph Kennedy III did here in Massachusetts when he primary challenged Ed Markey. And what a lot of people may not be aware of, if you weren't paying attention to that race, obviously Ed Markey was the older candidate, but Ed Markey actually had more progressive ideas than Joseph Kennedy III. And Joseph Kennedy really didn't bring many ideas to the table when he was debating him. He was basically just running on the fact that he was a Kennedy. Now, Joseph Kennedy III lost that race, and he lost that race because the youth turnout actually showed up and supported Ed Markey instead. Interesting, huh? Interesting. But it's not just that ad. There's something else happening here. And I don't know if you guys have heard about this. So RFK Jr. is not running through the Democratic Party anymore. However, the DNC has filed a federal complaint against RFK Jr. They are trying to prevent him from getting any type of ballot access. Now, I know he already has ballot access in Utah. He's not running through the Democratic Party, and they still went ahead and did this anyway. That's why I say we don't really have a true democracy in this country. I want to bring in this clip here from Fox Business, and we dive into this idea of playing dirty. RFK Jr. supporter rips the DNC federal complaint. Here we go.
The DNC, Democratic National Committee, filing a Federal Election Commission complaint against RFK Jr.'s super PAC's effort to put him on some key state ballots, about 10 states. Reaction now from the American Values co-founder, Mark Gordon. Mark, first of all, I got to get this straight because it's all so confusing. After spending a lot of time, at least a year, the DNC tried to keep RFK Jr. off the ballot. Now they're essentially suing you guys in front of the Federal Elections Commission because you're trying to get on some ballots. Where's the fairness in all of this?
There is no fair. This is what I've been saying before. When a lot of us were upset with the DNC rigging the election against Bernie Sanders, some of my friends that were not down with the Bernie, movement, some of my friends said, oh, well, it is what it is. Like, what are you going to do? Like, obviously, people want to be in the middle. They want someone that's closer to the middle. They don't want someone that's far right. They don't want someone that's far left. And they just shrugged it off. But it's really interesting because now you see they're applying this to other people as well. And this was the warning that I tried to give about that. You didn't have to be a fan of Bernie Sanders. You didn't have to like Bernie Sanders' policies. But the fact that the DNC could just come in and just rig the election like that, everyone should have been frustrated that that was happening. And the fact that the DNC lawsuit happened and the judge said that the DNC is a corporation and they can pick whoever they want. They don't have to choose who the voters select. Everyone should have been up in arms about that. But I feel like it was kind of just cast aside by the majority because people looked at it as though, oh, those are those crazy, Bernie people. Now we see it's happening to someone who's an independent. RFK Jr. is running as independent, not running through the Democratic Party, and they're still trying to rig things against him. Listen to this. So this is the gentleman that works with the super PAC that RFK Jr. has.
Well, the system isn't fair. It's clearly rigged, and the DNC knows that they have an incredibly weak candidate, and their only hope is to keep RFK Jr. off the ballot to prevent the American people from having a choice. Because when the American people actually look at the options of Trump, Biden, or RFK Jr., only one of them is a strong, sane candidate. And the American people are going to see that. So the DNC needs to do everything in their power to stop them. And they're prepared to break all the rules and play dirty because that's what they do.
Now, I want to chime in here for a second and say that, like I said before, RFK Jr. is not my candidate. But even though he's not my candidate, this is really messed up that they're going to these types of lengths just to make sure that things work out okay for Joe Biden. And it's really disturbing, actually. If you look at some of the polls, like you'll see in some of those key swing states that RFK Jr. is actually doing pretty well in reference to support. Now, some of the numbers have decreased over time, but still, if you look at a state like Michigan, Joe Biden is not winning that state. RFK Jr. does have, I think it's single digits in Michigan. It's gone up and gone down. It depends. But what they're trying to argue is that if RFK wasn't in this race, then Joe Biden would have more support in a state like Michigan. I actually disagree with that. I just don't think Joe Biden's going to win Michigan, period, because the largest Arab community is in Michigan, and they have a campaign called Abandon Joe Biden, right? So because of the war in Gaza. So I don't think it's just let's get him out of there so Joe Biden can win. And mark my words, ladies and gentlemen, if you think they're just going to try to do this to RFK Jr., you would be mistaken. I'm pretty sure they already have a plan mapped out to try to make things more difficult for Jill Stein and Cornel West and Claudia De La Cruz as well. So just wait for it. They're coming after him first because he's the one that has the most support as an independent / third party candidate. So they see him being a real threat to Joe Biden having a win in those swing states.
They're not here to defend themselves, so let me try to do the best I can to figure out what they're doing. First of all, they're saying you got to get all your ducks in order. That kind of makes sense. You got to get the signatures for the petitions. You got to identify folks who collected the signature, that sort of stuff. The second point they're making to the FEC is that your PAC has been colluding with RFK Jr. How do you deny that that's true?
Well, it's absolutely untrue. And the fact that the DNC, which is basically a collection of super PACs itself, would then have the temerity to accuse us of that. I mean, Biden is not personally working to get on any ballots. The Democratic Party is doing it. This is supposed to be a democracy. We're supposed to be giving people a choice. The Democratic Party doesn't want people to have a choice. Yeah. It's really as simple as that.
By the way, what we're seeing on the left side of the screen is that commercial that a lot of people saw in the Super Bowl, the Kennedy commercial, which some people in RFK Jr.'s own family suggested that he had something to do with. He denies it completely, saying it was totally done without his knowledge, that he was surprised, as most people out there looking at it. You can understand why people thought there was a connection between RFK Jr. himself and that commercial, but you're willing to swear in a stack of Bibles that you never, ever, ever talked to him and he knew absolutely nothing about that commercial?
Yeah, he did not see that commercial. This was completely an initiative of AV24. And it had nothing to do with the campaign.
I have to ask, despite your denials, and maybe you're able to prove everything you say, all of this costs money to defend yourself. I'm wondering how much of what the DNC is doing is just a matter of trying to squeeze the money out of your organization by forcing you to spend money on legal bills.
And there you go. A very smart person there. That is exactly what they're trying to do. I know because they did this to Jill Stein. Now, Jill Stein is a Green Party candidate. She'll be in it till the end. The Green Party candidates are, as long as I can remember, have always been in it till the end. But this is what they try to do. They try to nickel and dime you with legal fees and with the lawsuit so that you don't have enough money to get on the ballot in those states and stay on the ballot in those states and also run campaign ads. They're basically going to try to bleed this campaign dry.
Well, that's exactly what they're doing. And they've explicitly said that that's their strategy. And you also see that Biden's denying RFK Jr. Secret Service protection even after he's had multiple people come after him. Yeah. And that is so that the campaign needs to spend money on security. I mean, this is the way the DNC and Biden play the game, and it's very dirty.
That was really unacceptable, particularly when you saw Hunter Biden going to all of his meetings at Congress and everything surrounded by Secret Service. I mean, it was really too much. Mark, let us know what happens, okay? Stay close in touch. Appreciate the information. Thank you.
So you guys see what's happening, right? They're already starting to do it. And like I said, whether you support RFK Jr. or not, that's not the issue. The issue is the DNC should not be able to do this to any candidate. And these are the same people that argue that Donald Trump is a threat to our democracy. If Donald Trump is a threat to our democracy, wouldn't you argue that what the DNC is doing, pulling people off of ballots, not letting the voters actually have a real choice or their choice or make their own choice? They're trying to force the voters. They're trying to force you into picking between those two people, just Biden and Donald Trump. Wouldn't you argue that that is not a true democracy, what the DNC is doing? I certainly would. So if for all the people that are RFK supporters, you guys should try to rally around or something. I don't know what's happening over there in the camp, but you guys should try to get together and find some type of way to start a movement to push back against the DNC for doing this. This is exactly what Nico House tried to do after the Bernie Sanders 2016 campaign, when he went to the Becks, who were the lawyers that represented the DNC fraud lawsuit. That's exactly what Nico was trying to do. This wasn't just about, let's just go to court and help people get their money back. It was to put pressure on the DNC. So you look back on it and you may not have been a Bernie supporter, but now you see they can do this to anyone that does not fit what they call to be the status quo. Anyone that's not their chosen candidate, and he's not their chosen candidate. Now, there are other issues coming from the campaign because you see everything's coming out of the woodworks now. This is from Mediaite. The campaign is a mess. RFK Jr. hit with staff exodus over lavish spending and amateurish leadership. Okay, when we talk about lavish spending, just think about the lawsuits, right? Because that's something that he's going to have to deal with as well. Let me see if I can go in a little bit bigger. RFK Jr.'s campaign is in disarray amid an exodus of campaign workers who say disorganization, lavish spending, amateurish leadership, and a severe disconnect between the campaign and the candidate's values have led the long shot bid for the presidency astray. 14 members of Kennedy 24 have resigned since the start of the year, including 12 field staff and 2 main staff, according to multiple sources who spoke with Mediaite on the condition of anonymity. One source close to the campaign pinned the turmoil on 2 leaders, Amaryllis Fox Kennedy, campaign manager and Kennedy's daughter-in-law, and Del Bigtree, an anti-jab activist who serves as the campaign's communications director. The source described Fox Kennedy and Bigtree as self-serving operatives who were making decisions based on their own personal advancement opportunities and not acting in the best interests of the candidate. Now, remember, Fox Kennedy, this is the person that actually replaced Dennis Kucinich. That's RFK Jr.'s daughter-in-law, who was also a part of the CIA. A major point of contention within the campaign has been the eye-watering payouts to campaign leadership revealed in FEC reports. Bigtree's firm, KFP Consulting, was paid $35,000 in December. It has made $90,000 off the campaign in total so far. Starlight Saint, the LLC registered to campaign COO Matthew Sanders, makes $21,000 a month. More Beautiful World, the LLC registered to campaign advisor Charles Einstein, makes $21,667 a month in October, November, and December. When the reports came out and everyone saw the obscene amount of money some people are making, while they are often paying for their own promotional materials out of pocket and can't get their gas stipend covered, many people start thinking those people are scamming and skimming to line their pockets. That came from one campaign worker. This is out of alignment with the message of the candidate. The source said lavish spending of Big Tree and others is also a point of contention among campaign workers, recalling one incident when Big Tree joined a Zoom call from a skiing resort. Dell is running around spending money lavishly, another source said. He's doing Zoom calls from the slopes with champagne while many people are volunteers and not getting paid. So this is what happens when you don't run a grassroots campaign, right? So I like this type of campaign, I never participated with, right? But like Bernie, for example, had a grassroots campaign. So those kind of campaigns, when you're on the ground and you're knocking on doors, yes, there are a lot of volunteers. Most of the people on the ground are not being paid, right? That's how it is. But the reality is you don't have those types of funds to pay people with for the campaign in the first place as a grassroots campaign. But I think what could have happened here, the super PAC, and I think in the beginning, RFK Jr. was raising a lot of money. When I looked at the FEC filing, he had the most between himself, Marianne Williamson, and Cornel West. He had raised the most money at that point in time when I looked at it. But I think that, again, there was a difference from when you were running as a Democrat and you're running as an independent. When you run as an independent, it's a lot harder, right? And I promote independent runs and third party runs. But the reality is you do have to raise more money when you run third party or independent. Like there's a lot more that you have to pay for that isn't just going to come to you because you're not running through the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. So it is going to be expensive and you do have to raise a lot of money. And I think what could have happened is I think that now RFK Jr.'s campaign is starting to see some of the hurdles that you have to deal with running an independent campaign versus when he was running in the Democratic Party. A lot of those hurdles are financial. It goes on to say here, Fox Kennedy, meanwhile, hired her nanny, Bridget Rasmussen, a chef of staff, which was seen internally as a sign of incompetence for the director of a presidential campaign. A second campaign worker also griped about the hiring of Fox Kennedy's nanny as the campaign's chief of staff. Although Bridget is a nice woman, she has no idea how to operate in her role and is inexperienced. This is merely one red flag that indicates incompetence. The campaign is not run like a business, one source said. There is no professional environment. It feels like a spring break party cruise. Well, let me tell you, I've been on some spring break party cruise, okay? I've been on some of those spring break party cruise. Dell has heard on multiple occasions saying, "We are like rock stars, and this is like being on tour with a rock band." Fox Kennedy responded to the story in a statement. With over 100 staff members and tens of thousands of volunteers nationwide, Team Kennedy has great folks come and go depending on the needs of each phase of the campaign. As the most successful independent campaign of the last 3 decades, we wish them nothing but the best. NBC's latest poll has RFK at 35% with 9 months still ahead, and we are laser focused on delivering a historic victory for our country this November. So you guys see this? So the latest NBC poll has RFK Jr. at 34%. That's why the DNC is trying to get him off the ballots. That is why. And I just want to add this piece right here. We already talked about the Dennis Kucinich part. I'm going to get down here to this part here. Mediaite reported in October that Kennedy planned on leaving the Democratic race to run as an independent. He now faces an uphill climb to achieve ballot access in all 50 states as a candidate without the backing of an established political party. The campaign is a mess because upper management consists of people who are serving their own needs rather than the candidates, one source close to the campaign lamented. There is no one with any political experience, and it shows. So, yeah, they're having some hurdles there with that campaign. And notice how you're hearing these things now that he's running as an independent, and you didn't hear about these complaints when he was running through the Democratic Party. So, again, there are a lot of resources that you just don't have when you run third party or independent. It's just the reality of the situation.